In our previous video, we discussed the Peralez questline, talking about rogue AI and what they can do to the people in Night City. Eventually, an in-depth video on Mr. Blue Eyes will be talked about to fully close that story and get the other side of the questline, as while I think it's relevant for that video, there's a lot to catalog with him and his organization, so I think it deserves his own video. But in the meantime, I wanted to talk about another personal favorite quest of mine that deals with religion, faith, and corporate exploitation. That would be the Sinnerman questline with Joshua Stevenson. For the basics, to start this quest, we must complete the Hellman retrieval quest. Once completed, sometime later, we'll receive a call from Wakako. She mentions she has a client who is in need of a merc for a kill job. The client is willing to pay large amounts of eddies to make sure everything goes right. He wants us to kill someone and he wants to tag along to see for himself. After waiting, we meet the client, Bill Jablonsky. We're then told to wait until the car with Josh arrives, then we tail them. While inside, we ask Bill some more questions to understand why he wants him dead. Bill says that Josh murdered his wife and was put on death row, but for some odd reason, he is now out of jail and not getting a death sentence. Bill believes this is unfair, so we're going to be the new administrators of his death sentence, so to speak. According to Bill, he's being transported by some ordinary corpo people, so there shouldn't be too much resistance. In the middle of our talk, we do see the vehicle and chase them down. It's not a long or tough chase, although a couple cars do get in the way, and apparently Josh harnessed the power of the sun to distract me and make me crash, but overall wasn't too bad. A little later, they pull over and we're presented with two options. Should we succeed and shoot on sight, Bill will die and we have to take on the cop named Vasquez by ourselves, as well as any law enforcement that shows up due to us shooting a cop. After his death, we are free to shoot the lady in the front and Josh in the back, or blow up the vehicle, killing them both. We then receive 5,000 eddies and we end the quest line. Alternatively, the more preferred option is not to attack. When exiting the car, we can hear Bill talking about killing him. The job was originally for us to be the hitman, but now he wants to take the lead. He is then shot by Vasquez almost immediately. Josh gets out and protects us, telling Vasquez that if he shoots, our deal is off. The lady in the front gets out and disagrees, asking to have us killed. Her name is Rachel. Without even knowing our name, Josh begs us to join him. We can constantly ask him why he wants us to come along and what for, but we get no answers, only saying that we will find out on the way there. Johnny finally arrives and is surprisingly excited about the situation.
Ha! That's it. Got no fucking idea what this is about. But if you don't go with them, I'm never talking to you again.
If we leave the area and don't enter the vehicle, we fail the quest and they take off without us. If we do hop in, we get to talk with Josh more. Josh 12 years ago was sentenced due to armed robbery and murder. As he states himself, he had a gun and didn't like the way the people looked at him, so he shot them. Behind bars, he had lots of alone time, and in that alone time, he found peace through God. Once again, we can ask him why the hell we're even still here, and he says that if we join him for the rest of the day, the studio will pay us roughly the same amount that we get if we were going to kill him. I guess this studio is in some way related to Rachel, as she doesn't look like a cop and definitely the odd one out in this car. This, while a small piece, is still a piece of the puzzle regardless, so we press on. Assuming we said no when asked to be pulled over, we leave the vehicle and end the quest line. This is one of the many instances in this quest that we can just up and leave whenever we want to. We arrive at the house and a woman named Zuleikha answers the door. They seem to know each other. Could possibly be a relative or a friend of his that he wants to visit before they head to the studio. Us, Josh, and Zuleikha sit down, have a prayer, and talk. Hopefully we'll finally be able to get some answers.
Zuleikha is the sister of the man I killed.
Huh? Listening more, it seems like Zuleikha was sending letters to Josh while in jail, and they reunited through forgiveness. Going a bit back, we obviously have a ton of questions. When asked why she would let him off the hook like that, she responds with a Bible verse, specifically Luke 6:37. Do not judge and you will not be judged. Do not condemn and you will not be condemned. Forgive and you will be forgiven. This is going to be one of the many times this happens throughout the video, so I'm going to mention this now. As a person who isn't very well versed in any type of religious text or prayers, it's obviously going to be hard for me to understand some of the verses and their possible true meanings. I'll do my best to explain the significance of the verses as good as I can when they appear throughout the questline, but to anyone who is more well versed in certain religious texts than I am, I encourage you to comment and give your thoughts on these, as I think it'd be creating an interesting dialogue. For this verse, however, Zuleikha talks about judging, forgiveness, and condemnation, and says that she shouldn't judge a person on their actions, as God is the only one that can see their true intentions inside them. This verse talks about the plague of humans, and that is the spirit of judgment. While this verse is important in the current context, the prefix is just as important, as it talks about the Gospel of Luke, something that will be a little bit more relevant later in the questline. The second option talks about Josh's redemption, and Zuleikha will alternatively say that she lost one brother, but God gave her another. Josh further explains that it was Zuleikha's letter that started it all, so she seemed to have found God herself, which in turn made Josh find it as well, thanks to her letter. We could tell Zuleikha that's great, but didn't your God have your brother killed? She says that she grieved for days over her brother's death, but God showed her his plan and she found peace. Josh says that he does regret killing Reuben, and God knows he does. We can also point out how devoted they are as people of religious faith, which is quite rare in Night City. She says that it was God's interaction with our world that brought us here to our home. Josh will then ask us what our beliefs are. If we say we're unsure and that we kind of need proof to see, Zuleikha will say that the only person who can prove God's existence is us. If we don't believe in a higher power, then he simply just doesn't exist in our life, and vice versa. Saying we do or don't believe will lead to the following dispute. From asking either one of them, we uncover the real truth. The media found out that Josh discovered God in prison, and they wanted to capitalize on it and have him record some brain dances. This brain dance would be him getting crucified. Zuleikha clearly disagrees, saying that they are just using him, but Josh explains how he was going to die anyway thanks to his death sentence, but now he's been given a platform to help spread a message to the world about God and his faith. We can ask more questions like the reason for a brain dance and why not something else. Josh then says he was transformed into a child of God by Zuleikha and he wants to repay his debt to her, saying that he wants to show his true unconditional love, and that if love exists, then so does God, and that everyone can feel his warmth and should be reminded of his divine existence. He wants to reach everyone, Joy Toys, corpos, gangs, everybody. He wants them all to bear witness to his message of God. We can address our distaste for all of this or ask the law's opinion on all of this, and he brings up that he has a 1-day supervised furlough, so he is allowed to visit people during this time. After this choice, Zuleikha's mother will walk in. She's already well aware of Josh and says that Josh and us are not welcome here. Josh tries to apologize for his actions, but is shouted at and called a murderer. I wanted to fully exhaust this dialogue before I mention this, but I'm assuming that weird thought may still be in your mind. That even though she has found peace through God and accepted the loss of her brother, why does she talk to Josh like he's a casual friend? I was originally going to say it's Stockholm Syndrome, which is when a person who is captured sympathizes with their captor, except Zuleikha is clearly not captured. The sympathy part exists from the syndrome, just not the captured part. It's up in the air really what you want to believe what's going on with her. You could say it's really deeply rooted trauma being hidden by herself as she tries to find answers to the unanswerable question of why did this happen? Or maybe it is God's way of helping her and not some facade. Either way, it's evident she's clearly doing better, which is something to celebrate regardless of how it happened. We can leave and continue the quest, but let's explore the residence. The family house is surrounded by garbage and they live under a highway. I can't imagine the amount of people who live above or even the people on the highway that just chuck garbage down onto their house. Upon entering the house, we see a memorial for Ruben with a holy Bible and some candles on it. There's really nothing else downstairs besides this, although we can try to talk to Zuleikha and her mom, but we get no response. Upstairs is 2 rooms which have some shards and a computer with messages. Outside the 2 rooms is some medications. It's hard to read the label, but this is either some simple prescriptions for someone in the household or medications due to the trauma of Ruben's death. Considering there's a lot of bottles, it could be the latter. The far door opens into a simple looking room, but has a shard called Your God, Your Kiroshi. This is about the many religious practices and their stances on body modification. For a brief summary, it seems the Catholic Church isn't opposed to implants, and some clergymen have implants as well, so it may even be accepted in the religion. Mormon faith is quite different as they don't accept it, saying no God-fearing Mormon can sport implants, whether it's for functional or aesthetic purposes. The only exceptions are life-supporting or health-related, so a pacemaker or something like that would be okay. For Islamic faith, most Muslim leaders speak out against it, but it's not officially prohibited. And then lastly, for Judaism, they don't provide any implants for their members, except in the Hasidic communities where they are regulated by their community leader. This is interesting as it seems that religious communities give out implants, or at least provide implants to its members. In the other room is a computer and another shard. This shard is titled the Coptic Bible. It has an excerpt from the Book of Enoch from section 1 chapter 6 and section 1 chapter 7. Some may also call this the Book of Watchers as this encompasses the first 36 chapters. Chapter 6 talks about the Watchers. These are angels who were sent to Earth to watch over, but eventually lusted over the women of Earth. They wanted to have children of their own and be able to choose their wives, so they searched for future partners. Chapter 7 talks about the Watchers again and how they became so infatuated with women that they taught them their spells and enchantments. The woman would then become pregnant and give birth to giants that were thousands of feet tall who devoured mankind, including birds, fish, beasts, and even themselves. I have not the slightest clue how this relates in the context of the game. This could just be something Zuleikha was reading, or maybe it's a favorite section of the Book of Enoch. Honestly, I have no idea, so if you have anything, definitely let me know. On the computer, we see 4 messages. The first message is to a Reverend Nassau, talking about her brother's death and how to follow in Christ's path. The second message is a thank you to Reverend Nassau, who apparently visited the family at their house. The third message talks about the sign of Jonah and how she hopes that one day she'll be able to leave the belly of the beast and see the light. The fourth and final message is a thank you to Reverend Nassau. This is how Zuleikha was able to heal from the tragedy thanks to Reverend Nassau and his talks of love and forgiveness. This is most likely what prompted Zuleikha to write the letter and send it to Josh, and of course we know the rest. With the house fully covered, we can head back inside the car. We then stop by a nearby diner for a bite to eat, and Josh has some small talk with us and is still very insistent on getting crucified. Before we get out and go into the diner, however, Rachel wants to talk with us. All options will lead to the same dialogue choice in some way, but she thinks that Josh is crazy and definitely would benefit from psychiatric help. But they need Josh as he has authenticity. Too many BDs these days try to sell a story, but these actors are faking the emotions and it doesn't feel real. But with Josh, what he feels is authentic, which is something that is in short supply but in an insanely high demand in the entertainment industry. The reason she called us over is because we are making him question himself. Too many probing questions, as she says. It can make him doubt himself and not perform as well. She offers us a deal. Leave now and get double what we were offered. If we leave and end the quest, Johnny gets upset at us and we get paid in a couple days. Even if we try to walk back inside, the quest does not continue and Rachel tells us to buzz off. But we're already too deep into this story, so we have to press on. Johnny talks to us before we head inside and he discusses his thoughts on the whole situation. He thinks it'll end in pain and profit and is interested to see how this resolves. When we sit down, we're then presented with two options of dialogue, so let's discuss the BD first. The BD is called Passion, and you may see its image art posted around Night City quite a lot. They're planning on speaking to the lowest common denominator of people and hopefully revolutionizing the BD market. Josh only has 1 day because of his furlough, so there isn't much time to make a whole BD, so they're just going to be using the last part for actors and movie magic, so to speak, to get the rest of it finished. This is where we come back to the Gospel of Luke, as Rachel states that Josh forced the writers to go with Luke's ideals and not John's like they originally wanted. Josh thinks that John's version is crude and over the top and that Luke speaks to him more. The studio clearly agreed, as it would help with the authenticity. Rachel stops us in the middle of our talk as she wants Josh to not be distracted. We also have two options here, but let's go back to that previous option, as this one's also going to end up back here anyway. The other dialogue choice in the beginning is changing the subject. V is sick of discussing faith constantly and wants a change of pace, and wants Josh to choose. He's never been given the floor to speak freely like this, so he is a little flustered, but he discusses with us about the remake of Badlands Raid. We say whatever option we prefer, as it all ends back to where we left off. Rachel's been nagging us all day, so we could tell her to fuck off.
Joshua and I are talking, so fuck off, will you?
Excuse me? Realize the stakes here. Tomorrow, this guy's gonna create his masterwork.
I'd like to rest now.
Perfect timing. Your job's done here. You can go. And don't worry, you'll get your fucking money.
Goodbye, V.
That wasn't exactly how I thought this was going to go, but it's an option nonetheless. She says that we'll still get our money and we are told to leave. Instead of that, we can ask her what she does to relax. Josh agrees, as he knows nothing about her. We find out she frequently uses meditation to relax. Both options will lead us to her being displeased with us and ask us why we're even here in the first place. She once again cuts us off at both our options, saying that she doesn't care what we have to say and that all this talk about grace and salvation is making her puke. She then gets up and leaves. We say our goodbyes to Josh and he goes too. Johnny appears and talks with us more. He agrees that Josh definitely has a few loose screws, but this is all still corporate exploitation. We can give our thoughts on it, ranging from feeling sorry to not caring about him. At this point, we could just get up and leave, or we could ask Johnny on his thoughts about the afterlife and the existence of a higher power. He explains that he died and came back, so there could be some meaning to it, but Johnny assures us that it's completely false and it was just a clever bit of corporate technology, not some miracle. V questions if the afterlife exists, and that if Johnny is already there and we're just talking to his digital epitaph. Johnny doesn't care and probably never will. He's just living with what he's got and he's just gonna go along with it. Now that all the dialogue has been exhausted, we can leave and head home, until sometime later we get a call from Rachel. Josh is having a nervous breakdown and says that he needs us to calm him down. We make our way to the studio and see an angry mob outside. Judging from the signs and chants, these are religious believers who disagree with the actions that are about to take place. We walk past them and we meet with Vasquez, who instructs us where to go. Before that, however, is a shard on the table. This is one of those shards that exist in the playable area of a quest or mission, but don't really pertain in any way, just some cool general lore. This is from the point of view of a brain dance addict and just talking about their life experience with it. Besides that, there really isn't anything outside the studio besides two people arguing out back, so we head inside. There's a lot to take in here, so let's talk about the scenery first. It's your typical studio with lots of production equipment, camera, crew, and scaffolding, with the main centerpiece being the giant cross in the middle of the studio. There are a lot of shards in here, however, and a laptop. The laptop only has one message talking about the production introduction. Nothing really of note, except it's from Rachel talking to someone about how the writers are taking too long. At least we aren't the only one she's annoyed at. As for the shards, one is called He Found Jesus in Prison. This is of course talking about Josh. It says that Josh over anything wants forgiveness for what he did. It goes on to talk about his crimes like assault and murder. It seems to be a discussion about the whole situation in general, as this person is giving their opinions on it, saying this could just be a way for him to get on parole and not get the death sentence. The next shard talks about the Warsaw Catholic faith and its origin. This is more of an informational shard to provide the reader with some interesting information on a specific faith's values. We can find this shard in other places in the game as well. This could possibly be here because someone from the studio is reading into more religious faiths now that they're part of the crew for this film, or maybe to possibly understand things being said during the film, or maybe they're just curious. Another is called Mystical Rapture in Film. The first couple lines tell us about the decline of the supernatural in films. Maybe this is another reason why the crew jumped on this when they discovered Josh. Not only is he authentic, but the subject matter of this BD is low in supply, so it's not an oversaturated market. From a marketing standpoint, this is quite smart for the studio. Our next shard is Glam Now. Apparently some woman has been an advocate for BD diets. She apparently goes into the BD hungry and then comes out like she ate a full meal. Since she feels full after using the BD, she doesn't need to eat, and because she's eating less calories, she's getting skinnier. There really isn't any proof to this other than just her word, but it's quite the thought-provoking article. The last part talks about Carrie of all people and how his nudes were leaked online but were confirmed fake because his iconic tattoos were not in the photo, and that according to him, his dick was not the correct size. Thanks for the detail, Carrie. Our last two shards are in the room with Josh. The first one is a body count lottery. According to this, the final number was going to be 214 until a corner store murder happened that killed Mrs. Jablonsky and Mr. El Hamar. Of course, this was Josh's murder. Seems like both our grieving parties had their loved ones killed at the same time at the corner store. But then there's also the obvious body count lottery. Apparently, death is so common in the city that they make bets on how many people will die. Quite the dystopian society. The last one is an excerpt from the book Associates, specifically Chapter 9. Chapter 9 is more of a conjunction of the book's major themes of death and the value of wisdom. Josh was most likely reading this in an attempt to calm down from his mental breakdown. When we talked to Josh, he asked us to join him in prayer with him. There are technically 6 options, so let's start slow. The first option is to let Josh pray by himself, while we sit there next to him for moral support. He says the prayers of St. Augustine to the Holy Spirit. This is not about praying to God for what we need from him, but instead praying to increase our desire for God so that we may receive his future blessings. If we decide not to pray, then he prays to himself and we just wait. Our last option is that we lead the prayer. We have 4 options to choose from. The first is the Lord's Prayer, one of the more well-known prayers. This is a prayer obviously recognizing God and all he does for us, and that he continues to watch over us in all our endeavors. The second option is a fragment from the Amidah. This is a Hebrew prayer that is usually said while standing, so a little off that we're sitting while doing this. But the prayer is about constantly reminding the individual of God's existence and the daily act of repentance. Our third choice is from the Rig Veda, used in Hinduism. The themes of this prayer are similar to our past 2 verses. And the last one is a prayer of our own. This seems just to be a very popular prayer of good fortune. After this moment of prayer, we are presented with the last 3 options of the game. Josh not only wants us to be there for him while he's crucified, but also nail him to the cross. For the easiest option, we can just say we don't want a single part of it, and our only objective is to leave. Once that's done, we go on our way and continue the game. We can opt to do a bit of both in terms of the extreme options, where we say we'll join him, but will not nail him to the cross. The last option is going through with the whole plan. We walk with Josh as he sets up on the cross. While saying a prayer, we nail both his arms and feet to the cross. Johnny appears and bows his head in respect. The only thing left to do is wait until Josh dies, and it's an uncomfortably long time. Nailing him to the cross was hard to watch, but just watching him as he sits there losing blood is also uncomfortable too. Regardless of your choice, this ends the quest, we get our XP, and we can leave. A little bit later, we will receive a call from Rachel, either talking about the success or the failure of the Braindance. The difference between the two is how much money you receive, and if Rachel's mad at you. This is determined by dialogue. Throughout the whole questline, our dialogue has been secretly being tracked in the background, and certain dialogue choices give us a number. This number determines the outcome of the BD. Getting a 4, 5, or 6 is considered a failure, and a 0, 1, 2, or 3 is a success. These dialogue options are as follows. At Zuleikha's house, if we say yep, still not buying it, or whoa, insane, that's what this is, we receive a point for each. In the car ride, if we use our cool stat and talk about where we want to eat, that is also a point. Inside the restaurant, if we ask to stop talking about faith, that is also 1 point. And our last one is worth 2 points, which is at the studio. We receive these points if we say, "This is crazy, don't do it," or "You got pure intentions, but this isn't the way to act on them," when Josh talks to us for the first time. But notice the running themes for most of them. It's what Rachel talked to us about in the beginning, asking probing questions. Because we said all these to Josh, he didn't perform at his best, and the BD failed to garner a larger audience. The points are tied to the probing questions that make Josh think about his decision, and after hitting 4, of course, while it's not shown, his mind was most likely clouded with our questions and he wasn't paying attention and didn't perform well while being filmed. Sadly, no matter what happens in the end, a very running theme for this game in general, we really don't get a happy ending. Josh will die regardless and be crucified, but at least we can make the BD a failure to get back at them for exploiting him. This was an interesting quest. Not only did it bring religion into question, it did so in an interesting way. Josh and Rachel are also some interesting characters in terms of their intentions and ideals, as you can either think Josh has really found God or he's just mentally insane. Then with Rachel, who's a corpo trying to exploit Josh, a clearly not mentally sane person, for profit. It's a quest that had me thinking about it a while after I finished it, and definitely one of my favorites in Cyberpunk 2077. But this though ends the video, and I want to thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the deep dive of the quest Sinnerman. If you want me to do more of these videos, leave me some recommendations of quests that you like down in the comments below, and I'll consider looking at them. But with that, like the video if you do enjoy, subscribe if you're new, take care everyone, and I'll see you in a future video. Goodbye.